So I recently started playing Animal Crossing New Horizons again. And whenever you haven't played for a while, I think it's been like 9 months or something, you go outside and all the residents are like very passive aggressive. And they're like, I didn't even know you were still here. Where have you been? Lots, you don't like me, all these things like that. And of course, you come out of your house and you shake off your hair and it's all dusty and there's bugs in your house and everything. That's kind of how I feel right now each time that I start a new podcast episode. I'm like, no, really, I've still been here obsessing about all the Disney parks news and everything else. I just haven't been putting them out on the podcast. Well, last night, we had the big Horizons, a Carousel of Progress, D23, the Ultimate Disney Fan Event showcase. I watched it on Disney Plus. I was not lucky enough to be there, and I'm pretty excited about a lot of it. I know it's very easy to poke holes in it, but I think there's a lot of stuff to love, and I just want to talk about it for an hour. Let's hang out. I'll talk about what I think and what I love. It's kind of like an old school Tomorrow Society podcast episode. So in that vein, let's play the music. You're listening to the Tomorrow Society podcast. Hey there. Thanks for joining me here on the Tomorrow Society podcast. I am your host, Dan Heaton. And if this is the first time you've ever heard me on this podcast, let me give you quick background. I recorded 250 episodes of the Tomorrow Society podcast, going on almost 10 years at the time, ending in January 2025. And a lot of them were interviews with Disney Imagineers, people that work behind the scenes, authors, fellow podcasters. I also did some solo episodes like this one where I gave my thoughts on what was happening with the news. I did end the show. I've come back a few times. I did Disneyland trip reports. I had one where I talked about going to a bunch of Six Flags parks, and I'm unsure about what the future is. I don't believe that I will ever be in a situation where I'm trying to do weekly episodes or every 2 weeks or anything like that. But I will say I've had some thoughts about maybe doing some things. More on that at the end of the episode, but more as kind of like when the show started, where I just kind of record when things come up. I'm not going to start actively seeking out getting guests or anything like that. But currently, which is why I jumped on here, I'm feeling really pumped about the Disney parks and about the future and about the leadership, especially at WDI, and what they're doing, what they've done in the past few years, but especially going forward. Following last night's D23 Experiences showcase, Horizons, if you want to call it that. Part of me doesn't love that they always call it Horizons, but I get it. It still does fit with kind of looking to the future. I came out of last night's show, one, just enjoying the show, the presentation, even with some of the terrible moments, i.e. like Beck trying to sing and be Tom Jones or something, there was still fun. Because here's the thing. One of the reasons I wanted to record this is because I was so pumped about everything that's happened. Another is, I try not to spend too much time online reading responses, but some of it was just like, meh, they didn't really announce anything. There's a few updates, and I'm sorry, I don't know what you expect. And I know some of this is just online discourse, so I should understand that. But part of me just wanted to come on for an hour and just chat about what excites me. Yes, I'll talk about a few things that I would have liked to hear differently. I am not somebody who's going to be 100% positive. I mean, I'm not getting anything out of this. This isn't like a case where I have to do it to get access or, so that I can play nice with Disney. I'm doing this because I'm a huge fan of the parks. And I just love talking about them. And sometimes I just got to jump on here and, chat for a while about things that I'm enjoying and why this interests me and just the fun of it. I mean, you think about everything going on in the world right now, and I'm not going to get political, but I'm just going to say there's a lot of not great news out there, whether local, international, wherever. So when I see something like this where I can tell that something I love, I mean, this has nothing to do with Disney, but yesterday, the St. Louis Cardinals brought up their new young star, Joshua Baez, and he hit 3 homers in his first 3 at-bats. That's never happened in the history of the major leagues. I mean, and then people are like, well, if you want to look at it that way, well, he's probably not going to do it again. Matt Boyd's just not a very good pitcher or whatever. That's not the response I'm going to get. I'm going to be like, this has never happened in the history of the major leagues. And that's how I feel about that. Oh, the Cardinals aren't going to make the playoffs. No, it doesn't. That doesn't matter. And I'm sorry, I'll stop that voice now. I won't keep doing that. But my point is, sure, there's always going to be something with Disney, the theme parks, anything you love or care about, a TV show, a movie. There's going to be something where you're like, that wasn't really my favorite. I didn't really like that episode. I don't like what they did with that character. And that's cool. And we should talk about that. We should talk about things we don't like. I just always look at it as there's more nuance to it, or, hey, if we can't get excited about some of the things they announced last night, I mean, what are we even doing here? What are we doing? Or we're just here to complain. I mean, really, there's so many things that they announced that I'm like, oh my gosh, how long have I wanted them to do this? Now, we don't know all the details, but until I know details that I don't like, I'm going to look at it as a positive thing. I'm going to look at this and say, they've given me reason to trust them in a lot of ways recently. And I think we're going to look back when a lot of this stuff gets built. I'm sure there's going to be a dud attraction where everyone's like, yeah, that was a miss. That just did not hit. But given their track record recently, even just things like Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind being such a hit, Tron took forever, but it's a really fun ride. Or even more recently, the test track updates, which I look at and say, the people that worked on that found a way to keep it a modern attraction that wasn't just fan service, but also have it feel like classic Epcot, still have the fun and thrills of Test Track, still be a crowd pleaser, but also work with what Disney wants to do and work for a lot of the fans. I want that group involved with some of the other attractions we're going to talk about in a few minutes, because I think the vibes of that are great. Let's dive into the panel itself, or the showcase itself. You can look at it and say, well, this felt different. But I think there's been a big switch in how they approach these parks presentations since they moved to the Honda Center. Because you think about even 2 years ago, where Josh D'Amaro was talking a lot to the house band, and it was a lot sillier. And there were even the announcements, you've got like the mirror shows up and it's like, Josh, all those things. They're having a lot more fun with it, but I also have to remember to myself that, sure, I found it was a little much when Sheryl Crow came on and sang 2 songs. I think she's a fine, talented musician. She's not my favorite type of music, but she's fine. She sounded good. But I have to remind myself that while I would just be like, okay, you've got 2 hours, cram in as much info and announcements as possible. Not everyone is going to connect, even in that room, is going to connect as strongly with, okay, let's sit down and have, Chris Beatty talk for a while, or have Jason Grant or Kevin Feige or whomever, Ali Rubenstein, who's great, go in and talk about all this. No, that's not exactly what it's for. They are striking this balance where they're trying, it's a PR presentation. It's a, let's excite our fans. It's also for the people in the room that paid extra for this. They want it to be a show. They want to have bands come out. Some people probably were thrilled that Beck was out there. I was a fan of Beck for a long time. We're talking, 90s with Mellow Gold and Odelay and then even he did some acoustic albums that I thought were pretty decent. I remember seeing him live. It was probably about 10 years ago. And I was like, what happened? It's not that he has no skill, but he was just dancing and just like he really, really has zoned into wanting to be a pop star. But last night seemed totally out of place. I mean, his Cruella de Vil was bad news. And then him doing Where It's At the end with everyone on stage, which was just like, what? Like, what is happening? But they're trying to put on a show. Even Los Lobos, who I enjoy, that felt like weird because I'm like, okay, we're getting near the end. We're running out of time. What are we doing here? But it was a cool moment, I'm sure, for some people in the room. Now, I'd be curious if you were in the room if that was accurate. And of course, Neil Patrick Harris. Now, I am in the tank for NPH. And so I think he's so funny. His John from Carousel of Progress, and some point he could barely even keep a straight face. He was almost laughing where he's like, well, now we've gone to this. It was so funny. And just that opening number about animatronics. So the fact is, just with bringing in and having Neil Patrick Harris versus Josh D'Amaro. Josh D'Amaro, big step up from Bob Chapek. I mean, you think about Bob Chapek, who presented when he was Parks lead, not when he was the CEO, talked like he was talking to shareholders and had just used the CEO hands, and just the way he talked about guests and everything, just had no way to connect with any Disney fan in the audience. Like, always seemed way above it. Bob Iger's better. I mean, he didn't do this because he wasn't the head of the parks, but when he comes out, better, kind of seems with his sweater, he's, but still, Josh D'Amaro was on a different level, had more personality. And I think that's one of the reasons, obviously, he became CEO, but also seems like a smart guy. A lot of the decisions, I don't love it when he's talking about AI and some of the stuff with Disney Plus and all that on shareholder meetings. But as far as the parks, the decisions they've made, I think a lot of them have been positive. Bringing in Neil Patrick Harris does a couple things. One, he knows how to host an award show. This is not an award show, but this type of thing. He knows how to host it. He's very personable. He can work on the fly when it seemed like his earpiece wasn't really working. There's a lot of things he can do. He can sing. He can dance. They can do this ridiculous animatronic song, which ended with them all getting stuck and Joe Rohde coming out and unfreezing them, which was great. He can have these funny interactions with Jack McBrayer, who keeps coming out as, his character from Wreck-It Ralph for that ride, and then comes out as Jack Sparrow. Him and Tig Notaro, who I also enjoy, can have Glenn Close come out and just blow everybody away, back away from that. Or, Tig Notaro as Abraham Lincoln. I mean, you could do an hour just about that original number. But my point being, it changes the whole tone of the presentation. It turns into a show. But also it allows him to make jabs where, everybody can make fun of the Yeti. But for him to make that jab he made during the song about the Hatbox Ghost being before Leota and then Rolly Crump would never, that set the tone so well, because this is not Josh D'Amaro kind of awkwardly talking about something that him now as the head of the parks could probably fix. This is somebody who, yes, is employed by Disney. And obviously Neil Patrick Harris was in One of the World of Colors. He has a voice of Calvin Screamin'. But this is also Neil Patrick Harris, NPH, who's the voice of Coaster Radio, the podcast, who, all that. I mean, it's done interviews with Mike and EB where, he's just so nerdy and so big of a fan. And then you have John Stamos out there, who everyone knows from his auction purchases and stuff, is such a Disney fan. And the Imagineers you choose, there was nobody that came off really flat. I mean, I thought the cruise line presentation was kind of weak, but that also might be just my lack of being as interested in the cruise line. Even Chris Beatty seemed much better than I've seen him in the past. And you've got Jason Grant, who I mentioned, who I know is a huge Disney history fan based on just his social media presence. And then you have Bruce Vaughn, who I feel like the entire way Imagineering approaches these and what they've done has changed. And I don't know if it's you hire Bruce Vaughn and then the leadership kind of goes that way, or he's driving. I think he's driving it a lot. He just seems really genuine and authentic when he's out there. And even when he's kind of talking about guests and everything, it's not like cringeworthy like Chapek or somebody else, or even some of the more like PR focused Imagineers we've seen in the past. These seem like people that are creative. And the fact that they're a little awkward, I actually appreciate a lot, because it means that they know what they're doing. These are not dummies, but they're not as polished. And like I said, bringing back Ali Rubenstein, who left for a while, worked at Meow Wolf, but was here for like Shanghai and other the big projects. Having her and Bruce Vaughn, who was also here years earlier, and then having young Imagineers together with them, it's really great. And I think there's going to be a lot of fun projects coming up in the future. We're 15 minutes in. I promise you this is going to be less than an hour. This is not. And I know you've probably looked at the running time, but if for some reason this just started playing and you haven't, this will be less than an hour, because I told myself, yes, I could easily do 2 hours about everything they've done, but you can read the updates. You don't need me to tell you everything that's in an update. There's some great posts out. There's a Disney Parks blog post that summarizes it. WW Magic, pretty much everybody, Disney Tourist blog, whomever has done this. I mean, a lot of people have already released podcasts. I think Tim and Ben from Marty Called released something like in the middle of the night or basically or something like that. I saw Tim post something like 3:30 in the morning. Tim was at the D23 event in the room. I'm curious to listen to that, but I did not want to before I kind of got this recorded. But let's dive into the specific stuff. Here's what's exciting me. And I know they kind of did a double whammy at the very end with 2 announcements that kind of changed it. But even before that, I was pumped about it. But we have have to talk with the headlines. Imagination. We don't know anything. I had heard rumors the days before that Disney had approved an Imagination overhaul. I saw that on WDW Magic. I also saw something that said that maybe NPH was actually going to be Dreamfinder. Now, we did see at the very end, there's this fun moment where he comes out as Dreamfinder. And it seems like we're about to end the presentation. And you had the chairman of Disney Experiences, Thomas Maslam, out there, and he's getting ready to end it. And of course, then it's like, wait, you promised me. And I wondered at the beginning when Neil kept talking about how he wanted to be an animatronic, like that song and everything, if this was leading to this. But then basically he is dressed as Dreamfinder with the beard and everything. And they didn't say much about it. They didn't really get into it. But basically, I think this is going to be really cool. They're updating the Imagination Pavilion. I believe it's going to be a new ride that pays tribute to the original Journey to Imagination and then does a new adventure with Dreamfinder that they call it in the description, a new flight of fancy into our imagination at Epcot. Now, we don't have really much information, but really, you got me at Dreamfinder and Figment, and then I suspect they're going to not mess this up. I think this is going to be great. Now, I know I chatted a little online about this, but I'm not expecting this to be as good or the same or even better than the original. It is really hard when you have something that original and cool to top it. But I think they can do a really good job if they, again, kind of like Test Track, go to the spirit of what it was. And then you've got the Dreamfinder Figment interaction. You change Figment to not be this kind of troublemaker like he currently is. And I have a soft spot in my heart for, having written it a lot with my kids and everything else, the current version. But I'm ready for them to make the change. And I think this is super exciting. And when you combine this with a few of the other changes, there's a real recognition, I think, that rather than destroying, closing something, and having the IP, putting in whatever, Inside Out, whatever you want to put in there. Instead of doing that, they resisted the urge with Test Track to try and put cars in there or anything. There is something to be said for using your own park's IP. And Figment is their own park's IP. The fact you saw the furor about the popcorn bucket and how much people have grown to love Figment, even people that never experienced the original attraction and maybe even haven't watched a YouTube video of it. When they announced they were having Big Figment be a meet and greet and how popular that was. And then you have Figment kind of being the symbol of the Festival of the Arts and all of that. Figment sells a lot of plush, which I know I hate to become commercial like this, but there's a lot of reasons for them to do a home run here, business and creative. And the only question is really how long it's going to be. Because this is kind of similar to when they announced the Villains Land, 2 years ago. This is probably a case where we may not see much of a change. I don't know for sure. I have no background. They could work on this quickly, but my guess is that this and the update to Spaceship Earth that I'm going to talk about in a minute, those two are probably maybe going to be more, we hear more about them in 2 years, or even if they decide to give us updates at Destination D23 next year. I know they didn't do a parks presentation this previous year, but maybe they could do a few things like that. You think about all the things that are going to open sooner, but you don't really have that coming, all the construction up at Epcot. So, you have a situation where all the other three parks have major projects in the works. So Epcot, you could do a situation where you're probably doing one and then the other. Probably doing Spaceship Earth first, but who knows? With the momentum and the excitement of this, of people being so excited, maybe it's in their best interest not to wait too long. But maybe they could also, if they're going to do anything with the Magic Eye Theater, do something with that and then have one side open and one side closed or something like that for a while. But regardless, personally, I'm really excited. And until I learn something that makes me not excited, I'm going to be thrilled about this and I'm going to dream and think about how cool this is going to be to have Dreamfinder and Figment. Who would have thought? With all the thoughts of this is going to close, this is going to be replaced, to actually be able to do it. And if Neil Patrick Harris is involved, like the rumors, I think this is going to be a home run. Cannot wait. Speaking of that, Spaceship Earth, they did announce an update to Spaceship Earth, which is something that also has been rumored out for a long time. And I know they announced something prior to the pandemic. I think it was announced in 2019. But my understanding of this is completely separate. Sure, they may use little parts of what they were going to do. But the whole other one with the story light and everything, I don't believe that's connected to this at all. They're talking about is the first update in 20 years, which for nearly 20 years, which is pretty crazy. And the theme is going to switch from communication, which you could argue, is it really that anyway now? Communication to human connection. Ali Rubinstein was up at the time, and she even stressed this is going to be connected to Classic Epcot, which to me, I'm not talking about fan service Classic Epcot. I think that means no IP. So when they announced originally it was going to be about storytelling, to me, I felt like there was going to be some IP. We did see like the hints that maybe there'd be something related to Moana in there, and that was also Chapek. So of course, he's someone who basically said that all that really mattered was brands. So the fact if they're doing this big update and it sounds like not having IP, to me, I feel very positive about it because I know we love the current version of Spaceship Earth. You know, obviously the band at the presentation was called the Phoenicians. There's a lot of fun lines, and I do appreciate a lot of the updates they made from the Jeremy Irons version to the Judy Dench version in the Ascent were well done. The animatronics look better. The music is great from Bruce Broughton. There's a lot of positives, but there are also things that could be improved. They really, I don't know if they're going to do it, but they could do so much with the dome at the top, with some physical sets or with something more with the screen. I hope they do that. And then the descent. I mean, I think that's going to be really, because they talk about leading up to the present and the future. They said every scene's going to receive some type of update, but I really think the focus is going to be on the second half of the attraction. And if you bring that second half of the attraction up to the level of the first half, this becomes like as good as it's ever been. That was the thing about the Jeremy Irons version. It didn't include Tomorrow's Child, but it didn't have a dead zone. The second half was great too. And that's really what you need to do. Like I said, because of Test Track and what they did there, I feel pretty confident we're going to see a very similar update here. Now, it might not be exactly how all of us would want it to be updated, but I feel like it's in good hands. I think they recognize the importance of this and not putting in cheap IP. And just in general, we're seeing this where imagination, the IP is Figment. The IP is not something else. Here it's this way. There's a few other changes where IP is still very important. Selling the brands is very important. That's always going to be the case. But I'm sensing a real shift. Now, I don't know if this is coming more from Imagineering. It has to at least partially be coming from Tomorrow being involved. He hasn't been the CEO for that long. A lot of these projects likely were discussed when Iger was CEO, but Tomorrow was head of the parks. So I'm not expecting at all that all of a sudden we're going to see this era where everything is not IP driven. No, a lot of the projects being involved right now are related to Disney movies and everything else and characters. That's fine. That's how it's always been. But there could be a balance. And when you already have something that's so good, like Spaceship Earth is its own thing. I mean, like with the Phoenicians and everything else, again, it's its own brand. Value that and make it better. And I think they're going to. Yes, in these cases, we don't have a lot of information. I look at recent updates, not just Test Track, even the Country Bear Jamboree, which I know did add Disney songs. I have not seen it in person, but people that I respect have said that it's really well done. That is a positive sign. The fact that, yes, they put in Disney songs, but they didn't close it. An even better example is the Carousel of Progress, which we learned more about. We learned that Bryan Cranston will be voicing John. I assume he's still named John. And then we have Jamie Lee Curtis as the mother. And that's great. I mean, Jamie Lee Curtis, I feel like sometimes I think she's great, other times, but I still think is very talented. Bryan Cranston, that's like a home run pick. I mean, it's great for that role. His voice carries gravitas, and I think both of them will do an awesome job. And then the concept art we saw, there's some in the pavilion, but then also they presented last night. But everything I've seen just looks great. It looks like one of those situations where like they're doing so much more. I remember thinking like, okay, if they could just fix the final scene, if they could just remove a few of the old references, if they could do a few elements, this is like a wholesale change. And I know this has already come up. This is not new news, but as I learn more, I go, wow, even in the current version, not every line is so sacred. There are parts of it, the way John acts, where people say, yes, we're so used to it now. But there are parts of it that I don't really think are very good. And then there are parts of it that are great. I'm sure that's going to be the case again. But everything I've seen, it doesn't just feel like fan service. And this is a big point I want to make too. We'll see. Until we for sure know, we won't know. But think about this. Where have you been in the past where you thought, where Disney was closing, that, you know, in the 90s, they closed World of Motion, they closed Horizons, Living Seas got gutted, they closed Wonders of Life, you know, a lot of changes, or even at Magic Kingdom, Tomorrowland, Timekeeper's gone, and then you have Laugh Floor, which doesn't really feel as good to me, and just, you know, Buzz Lightyear being at Tomorrowland, I know they've made updates to that, but there was a stretch where it was like, okay, original IPs, especially at Epcot, but just in general, kind of that classic Disney attraction, they're just going away. They're getting replaced. You replace Horizons with Mission Space. That's the perfect example. Perfect. Because even Test Track I like, so I can't use that as a perfect example, though I do miss World of Motion. They replace things and it's different, and sometimes it's good. Guardians of the Galaxy, for example. Sometimes it's not. Mission Space. But you look at this and you go, okay, they just redid Country Road Jamboree. People still love the Tiki Room. Carousel Progress is getting redone. Spaceship Earth, Imagination, all these rides, if they are taking the time to replace them and set them up, are going to be in place for decades. That's awesome. That's so good. And it gives me more hope for things that people have enjoyed more recently now, like Living with the Land, for example. Even Impression to France is still hanging on. A lot of those types of attractions, given this approach, like with Test Track, I have a lot more hope that we're going to see a lot of these kind of classic attractions that for a while were kind of falling by the wayside, not only stick around, but also get heightened. Think about the updates they made to Jungle Cruise, what they just did to Big Thunder Mountain Railroad. They've done a lot of cool updates that only enhance it. Of course, Pirates and Haunted Mansion get updated all the time. Some of them are great. Some of them don't always work as well, but still, they are finding ways to keep these classic attractions fresh, but also not remove them. Now, the exceptions, I will say, I remember 2 years ago, I recorded a podcast really quickly about my thoughts, and I was pretty optimistic. Not as much as this time, but I was still optimistic. And then I found out, I didn't realize the Cars Land was replacing Rivers of America because Disney did not mention that. And I was gutted. And I remember I recorded an extra 20-minute episode talking about it. So we lost Rivers of America and we lost Muppet Vision. Those two losses, still tough to take. I mean, I know we have Muppets and Rock and Roller Coaster, and there's still Rivers of America at Disneyland. And everything we saw from Piston Peak and the Cars area looks great. I mean, it looks really pretty and attractive. It looks cool. Both attractions seem nice. What they're doing with the main attraction, I know we learned the names of the rides and everything else. The second one looks a lot like Mater's Junkyard Jamboree, but what we learned about the kind of signature Cars attraction, I think looks pretty cool. I don't know if, Cars Ridge Run Rally, I don't know if that's going to reach the same level as Radiator Springs Racers, but it looks like a fun attraction. But it still hurts me to lose Rivers of America. So again, I want to acknowledge that as far as I know, nothing they announced is like taking out something currently. I know we also lost Dinosaur for Indiana Jones. They seem to have a better recognition overall that there are ways to save these attractions, make them better. It probably doesn't cost as much as creating a Villain's Land. So you mix that in with these big, massive expansions, and you could really have something cool. Well, I want to get into a lot more of the updates. Before I do that, I have one more point about IP. We've recently learned here near me with Silver Dollar City, they just announced a huge expansion with this classic mine train, modern mine train. They're closing Thunderation. They've also made updates like Fire in the Hole and Time Traveler. All these changes they've made, they're creating their own IP. The same thing with Night Flight Expedition, which is opening basically as we speak at Dollywood finally, where they're using the Smoky Mountains and everything else with Dollywood for their own IP. We're seeing this with parks, including even some Six Flags parks, where they're creating IP that is not just like DC characters or movies or whatever they can buy. And the two, Silver Dollar City and Dollywood, are great examples. where they're using their own history in their parks and in the area where they are. And that's what I think Disney is finally realizing a little better, that they can really mine this IP themselves. And I think Imagination is a perfect example. Spaceship Earth is a good example. And I hope that carries over to Disneyland's update of Tomorrowland. This was the other big one with Thomas Maslam again at the end, where it seemed like it was about to end. And he had one more thing he wanted to talk about, which is they are working on a overhaul of Tomorrowland Disneyland, which is something we've been hoping for so long. I went to Disneyland back in February, and the one area that I just didn't really want to hang out in much was Tomorrowland. I went on Space Mountain a bunch of times, did Buzz Lightyear, did Star Tours, did the subs, side of the Matterhorn, but did not want to sit there. It just was not comfortable. It's just kind of felt old and dated. And the approach that they say they're taking is that the transformation of Tomorrowland will honor the legacy of the original land while reimagining its future. And they're striving to preserve what guests cherish most while introducing new experience possibilities. Another thing that I thought was interesting is they talk about having more open spaces and new places for guests to dream about the future. It seems like the best way to do that would be to lose the former Carousel of Progress Star Wars Launch Bay building right there. But I'm sure there's other changes they can make like that. I hope it's not losing the Nemo subs. But if you think about it, if you're really trying to cherish the past and look about from what Walt Disney did, you need to have the People Mover. Now, they did not announce this. This is something that I'm sure a lot of people wish they would. But again, I'm going to assume, given what they've announced and everything else they're doing, that they recognize the importance of having some type of People Mover system above that park. I mean, look at how popular it's become at Walt Disney World, which wasn't always the case. I think they know that that is something they need to do. Now, maybe they haven't figured out how. They haven't figured out what they're going to do. I think it needs to be there. I think they might also lose Autopia. That would give them a lot of space. And I know that has a lot of history, so maybe they wouldn't. But I have a feeling we're going to lose something. I mean, I think Astro Orbiter needs to move to somewhere up high and not be right in front of the entrance, which has always been weird. But overall, this is exciting to me because I trust the current leadership. I don't know much about Thomas Maslam. I'm just talking about what they've done recently to finally look at this. And I know everybody, they always stress Walt Disney and what he wanted to do and everything else. But I feel like the wording, even with open spaces and new places, they didn't mention any IP. And sure, there might be some. I suspect that Buzz Lightyear and Star Tours will remain. They're up near the front. It's more the rest of Tomorrowland. You have Space Mountain, you got Buzz Lightyear, you have Star Tours. Everything else, I feel like it's hard to say, but I feel the obvious areas they could remove, like I said, Autopia and the launch pad. Who's to say what they're going to do? But I feel pretty confident. I don't think we're going to see a bunch of Marvel stuff. We've got Avengers Campus getting huge over in California Adventure. I think it's likely going to be original IP. And even if it's not, if it feels right, I'm good with it. I'm super pumped about this. I feel like it's going to be a while, though I have heard through the grapevine that this likely would happen before the updates to the Avatar Land coming to DCA, which it sounds like is still happening, still going to happen, which, hey, I don't know the movies. I thought Fire and Ash was just kind of just okay. Visually looks stunning, but I feel like Pandora works really well as a theme park land, and I was excited by what we learned so far and what we might see. So I'm excited. It's funny because it seemed like it was gone, and then they had models, and they did mention at one time during the showcase that Pandora was still happening. But to me, I'd rather see, obviously, Coco's going to happen first. But Tomorrowland is kind of the other big change they made that I'm super excited about. Another thing that's cool and kind of fits with what I'm talking about here with IP is their announcement about Paris' Space Mountain. And I know we had heard a lot of rumors that Disney World Space Mountain was going to get redone, and that could still happen. They don't have to wait 2 years. This is something, if you're going to retrack it or whatever else, that could be announced separately. And plus, telling people it's going to close for a while might not be the best update you want to give at a positive, uplifting presentation. But the fact that they are redoing Disneyland Paris' Space Mountain, this is the one that originally started out being themed to Jules Verne and then was switched to Mission 2 and then has been Hyperspace Mountain for a while. They're taking Star Wars out of that, going back to the original version of the attraction. It's going to be new. It's not exactly the same, but in that vein, think about what they did recently with that Adventureland treehouse, where they had Tarzan and people thought it was going to be in Kanto. This is at Disneyland. And then they went back and called it the Adventureland Treehouse, but really had it be more themed to the Swiss Family Robinson and everything else. Again, this is kind of like that, where they've had Star Wars for a while. It wasn't originally designed for Hyperspace Mountain, and now switching it back to with the original soundtrack too that everyone enjoys. And I hate switching it back isn't even accurate really, but using that theme as a point for a new version. I love Disneyland Paris to Space Mountain. I know a lot of people have said it was so rough, but again, I wrote it Mission 2. I wrote the Mission 2 version 20 years ago. I remember thinking it was thrilling and awesome. I think this right here, if you want an indicator of how they're viewing kind of a lot of their legacy and past attractions and everything else, as we look at updates to Disneyland's Tomorrowland and Spaceship Earth and Imagination, the fact that they're doing this with Paris' Space Mountain and taking Star Wars out of it and looking back and using their Jules Verne IP, which fits best with the style of the building, which is stunning, and making some updates to the launch and just creating an updated version, this should give you a lot of hope and a lot of promise, because I think it's going to be super cool and not something I expected. It kind of came out of nowhere, but I know the people that cover Disneyland Paris are super pumped about this. I don't know when I'll get back there. I would love to get back. I think I will someday, especially, it'll probably be after the Adventure World updates are all in place, which that's also cool, kind of what they're doing there. I think the Lion King log flume that they showed concept art of it reminds me a lot of Splash Mountain, but I mean in a good way. Just, and of course of Tiana's. But the way that they're kind of going through the story, and it was interesting. They even talked about this like fight with Scar and how they're going to show that. And it's kind of funny to me as you're going up over this hill. I mean, obviously we are not Scar when we're riding this, but it's interesting that you're going to go down a hill like Scar falling off the cliff or something. I don't know. It's a little interesting, but I think everything I saw of that, it reminds me a lot. I mentioned it's Disney World because the way the log flume vehicles are, that appears more similar to Disney World. And I remember when, for a while, it looked like there was going to be a Moana kind of log flume at Disney's Animal Kingdom when they did that whole thought experiment part. This kind of feels a lot like that. Again, this isn't really something that's going to impact me directly soon. Same with the Tokyo Space Mountain, where they showed more of that, and that all looks awesome. That whole area looks really impressive with their one called Space Mountain Earthrise that they are updating. I don't know when I'll get to Tokyo. I would hope someday. I've never been there. I think I might get there before I get to Paris again. This doesn't impact me in the near future, but it's a really good signifier of where they're going as a company and as Imagineering. These updates they're making that all seem to be really interesting and make sense both commercially from a business perspective, but also creatively and for the fans and for providing a new cool experience for us when we go. It's crazy. I've gone 40 minutes without mentioning the Yeti yet, which probably got the biggest reaction that we could tell watching on Disney Plus in the room. Basically, they come out and they actually indicate they are going to fix the Yeti. That's cool. That's cool. And not something I really expected. And it was funny the way they used the wording they used, which is just like, the Yeti is coming back to life. Like, it's been dead. Now we're bringing it back to life. And this is really exciting. In one sense, I'm really excited to ride this and see the Yeti. I swear that I rode this with the Yeti really moving, but I rode it in early 2008. And then all the reports seemed to indicate that it only worked for a few weeks. But I believe whatever I rode, it was moving a lot more, and it was pre-full disco Yeti era. I also have to compliment them on the most ridiculous moment of the night, which is Gloria Gaynor doing kind of a Yeti variation of I Will Survive after they announced this. Oh, Thomas Mazel announced it, and just her sitting in that chair and singing right after they announced the Yeti thing. That's the thing. It's just so ridiculous. It's just the overall vibe. I'm going to talk about the overall vibes again at the end, but I just got to say personally, I don't expect this probably to happen until they've gotten pretty far along in the Encanto Indiana Jones updates. But the fact, I don't think they would shut down Everest while that other whole area is under construction. Maybe if it's a phased opening, they do part of it and then would do it. But I think it's really cool, and it's a really good example too. This isn't something that's going to have, yes, there'll be an initial bump. Not going to have a huge difference. Similar to Spaceship Earth even, probably won't lead to super larger crowds at your attractions. Like Everest is very popular. Eventually it'll just kind of settle in, similar to Test Track. It'll just kind of settle in. But that was a little different because that's kind of sponsor driven. Here it's just something where they're heightening it. And yes, it's fan service, but it's really good fan service. And I suspect the modern technology allows them to, probably won't be exactly the same, probably won't even use the same component parts, but to do something where it does not destroy the structure, it moves around more fluidly. Like we've seen some animatronics. I have not watched the POV, you've been there, but like with monsters, with some of the moves those animatronics can make at Epic Universe, I think there's a lot more they can do now. We see when they're working well how fluid the movements are from the Tiana audio animatronics and some of the other ones coming in the future. I'm sure we're going to see at Villains Land. So this is very promising and something that I can't wait to see. And also I did not expect. It's one of those kind of like, they're just going to keep talking about this forever. It's funny because last time, 2 years ago, the two things I thought they were going to announce from what I heard were Imagination Update and Disneyland Tomorrowland. Neither one happened. But I really didn't think they would announce anything with the Yeti. It'd just be something that, it always kind of like kick the can down the road. It would always be for the future. It would never be for now. And I think it's awesome. They're going to fix it. And I hope it all works out great. It was fun to see Joe Rohde, not for this part, but just around and everything else. He's obviously has his new book coming out, Floating Mountains. And speaking of that, the updates we saw for Indiana Jones and Encanto, I think look really great. It was funny to see Harrison Ford show up for Indiana Jones and basically say, this time they're using me as the model. And I'm like, we're going to use old Harrison Ford? But no, it is interesting that he was not involved with his voice or with him for the Indiana Jones of California. I know that. So it's cool that he's more kind of endorsing this. But I love the idea too. This is not just a rehash completely of the California version. This one is called Indiana Jones and the Myth of the Jade Serpent. Apparently has a giant snake at the end. Also kind of focuses on Mayan culture. This is one where we had Chris Beatty, an Imagineer that I hadn't been familiar with in the past, Michael Hutchin, but who I thought have also had a good stage presence. Both of them up there had a lot of fun kind of giving a bunch of updates. I don't know. I think this is going to be great. You can't really go wrong with Indiana Jones. Even if it was a straight clone of California, I would love it. But this seems like something very different. I'm sure it's a similar ride system, obviously. And even the shots they showed from inside the construction, it looked like they were completely gutting the building and starting over. Now, I don't know if that was the case, but this is not a quick overlay. This is them doing some big changes. I can't wait to ride it. And it would have been nice to have both, but I understand having Indiana Jones in this tropical Americas area is going to be super fun. And then we also learned details about the Encanto attraction, Antonio's Fiesta de Encanto. I love that there's not a height requirement. This is also the case with the Coco boat ride. And I don't have young kids, so this isn't about me trying to take a young kid on. This is more, though, I like them having attractions that it seems like anyone can ride, including people with motion sickness, older guests that even might have found something like Ratatouille to be a little too extreme, or, just through the kind of the jarring movements, or Runaway Railway or something even. I don't know what the height requirements are on those, but both of these, they made sure to stress that they do not have height requirements. Everything that they showed makes me think this Encanto attraction is going to be a home run. They're going to have over 50 animals represented in the attraction. There's a lot more info, including they showed a clip with at least 3 of the actors, Stephanie Beatrice, Jessica Darrow, and Diane Guerrero, who played Mirabel, Louisa, and Isabella, all involved with creating this and doing the new story dialogue on that. So that looks great too. And I think Encanto has an awesome soundtrack. It's a really strong Disney film, and it's going to be really good. Similar for Coco at DCA. I love that it's a boat ride. We need more boat rides. More boat rides, please, Disney. And it seems to be slow moving. I think they're going to do a great job with that. And it's going to California Adventure needs more attractions like that, especially because ultimately we're going to lose at some point probably the Monsters Inc. attraction, which isn't even perfect, but is another indoor dark ride. We need a lot of that. I know we have Web Slingers, and we're getting obviously the 2 new Avengers attractions, which we found more info about those, which I'm still finding it hard to get that excited about the Kuka Arm attraction. It just seems like a little too much of lift you in front of a screen and shake you around. But I know the technology, I mean, I believe it's kind of, they say it's all new technology never used before, but it kind of looks like Forbidden Journey Kuka Arm technology. But still, the technology looks great for that too. We had Kevin Feige out there also with another Imagineer talking about the 2 big attractions. And then we saw clips like they were able to film some of this with filming Avengers Doomsday. So that fit with that. We saw a lot of the actors and everyone else who was involved with that kind of getting ready to film. And they did announce that would open in 2028. And one other part about the Marvel presentation that I found interesting was them even saying, and we're going to have a walkway opening soon from Avengers Campus to Cars Land, which right now Cars Land does have that walkway, which takes you over by the San Francisco Square. But having another walkway from Avengers Campus, which is kind of a dead end over there, I mean, eventually kind of rolls around Hollywoodland. And they even said the phrase no dead ends. And to me, now you still got to fix the Hollywood Studios dead end, but little touches like that are a big indicator of just the approach they're taking. And I don't mean they've never done that before, but for them to mention that, and the height requirements thing is another mention, to continue to mention those types of guest considerations, I think is really important. That makes them, they understand this is less of a industry shareholder consumer showcase, which Chapek always seemed to think it was. Like, you should never have had that Target combo segment. Things like that should never be in there. Never. The fact that they understand that this is for the biggest fans to tell them about it. And then for some other fans, but especially for the biggest ones, there was definitely more of an approach for that with little touches like that. Wanted to briefly mention also Monstropolis, which we got a lot more info on. Every part of the land except for the door coaster is going to be open next year. Also, what I appreciate too is it doesn't look like it was budget cut at all. We've got a new show which is going to be there where they introduce humans to Monstropolis. We have a pizza place, which I assume is a rethemed Pizzerizzo. And then we also have the Harryhausen's restaurant. This is like different than what they did with Galaxy's Edge, where they should have had a full service restaurant and they ended up having Oga's. But here you've got already, and I know they did close Mama Melrose, so it's not like completely new, but this is obviously very different. You have this themed restaurant that I know people are going to want to go to with the sushi chef audio animatronics figure. Then you also have a shop. And with all that, then you have the big coaster, which is still coming together. That's a lot for a land in a park that's already, made a lot of updates recently. I mean, not really recently, but Toy Story Land, Galaxy's Edge, Rock and Roller Coaster update, new shows. I feel like they've recognized that these lands need to have a lot more to it than just one big ride. So I think that's a big plus too. And speaking of that, Villains Land, we learned more about that, I should mention. It's funny because I'm focusing on a lot of kind of my Epcot history updates or Tomorrowland or that. And it's almost like we were getting near the end. This is before I was still hoping Imagination and Tomorrowland would get mentioned. But then they got to Villains, like, oh yeah, they haven't talked about Villains Land yet, which I know for a lot of people is like the thing that they are most excited about. And I did enjoy the moment where they were going to confirm the name and they just named it Villains Land as opposed to calling it like Galaxy's Edge, for example. You have Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, Blackspire Outpost, you have Batuu, you have Star Wars Rise of Resistance. You have these long names that just go on and on and on. Here, you just very simple, Villains Land. Because like with Star Wars, everybody just calls it Star Wars Land. So why not just call it Villains Land? Makes sense. They confirmed the Maleficent Coaster, which looks really high-tech and cool. And the one that I think excites me even more, which is the Mirror Realm dark ride in the Villain's Land with the magic mirror. Looks to be the Shanghai Pirates or Frozen in Tokyo ride system. Those both look super cool, and I think it's still going to be a while. It's not going to be open super soon because I think Piston Peak will open before it, and Kanto and Indiana Jones will open first, and the other park, Monstropolis, open first. This is kind of the last of the things we know. I don't know what you're talking. You're probably talking 2030, I would think, 2029. I assume the next D23 Expo is where they'll announce like the date or at least the year, because, also we have the updates in DCA, at least the two, Coco probably coming sooner, and then the Avengers Campus updates, they did confirm 2028. But there was an interesting moment with Glenn Close where she came out and she was like full on, chewing the scenery, Glenn Close, with Neil Patrick Harris and Tig Notaro as kind of, she was Cruella de Vil, and, from the live action movies, she of course played Cruella de Vil. And then they were kind of the lackeys, and she was, the Imagineer, just out there, Bruce Vaughn and another Imagineer were out there talking about Villain's Land. And then for her to just be up there, Carolyn May is the other Imagineer, talking to them, giving them trouble. But it seemed to hint, and again, I have not closely followed all the rumors because I'm just kind of waiting for things to be announced. Seemed to hint at a third ride, likely some sort of flat ride. She mentioned Dalmatian ride vehicles. Maybe it's another kind of similar to the Mater's Junkyard Jamboree Alien Swirling Saucers kind of system. That I'm not sure about. That's not official, but that seemed to be what she was strongly hinted at. And I thought they would confirm it right after, but then they didn't. They just left. So I'm not 100% sure about that. But that is also something that's really, it just looks super well themed. I'm less excited like, oh, I really like this villain. Like, oh, I've been waiting for Maleficent or the Evil Queen or whatever. It's not really about that. It's more about, I think this appears to be a highly themed, really cool land. Modern. The Magic Kingdom doesn't really have that, like on level with Pandora or Galaxy's Edge. On the same level, Epcot doesn't really do lands like that, at least at the moment, unless they eventually get some sort of new World Showcase pavilion. We get something like that in Magic Kingdom, and plus with Cars, it's almost like two modern lands getting dropped in there. It's already the most popular in terms of attendance park in the world. It's just going to make the experience better for everyone, I suspect. Now, I know I haven't covered all the updates, but like I mentioned, all the info is out there. But, there's things like, I think the Hong Kong Disneyland Avengers Pavilion looks really cool. Along with that new attraction, it looks to be kind of like a Mission Breakout type attraction. Then you also have the new coaster. Again, why do they always have to use the spider bots? I don't know. I guess it kind of fits with some of the other attractions, but Shanghai getting the Spider-Man coaster. I haven't really talked about Wreck-It Ralph updates for that replacement of Buzz Lightyear, but, that looks like a pretty fun attraction also. So, there's a few other things. Disney Cruise Line made a bunch of updates, and I don't feel like I'm the best person to talk about those. But just overall, I want to close by just talking about my overall feelings about where Disney is heading and just the vibes of all of it. First of all, the vibes, I think, are really positive. I feel like they recognize that they need to have a mix of A, brand new immersive lands that people love, B, updating tired attractions or updating attractions like Imagination that just need help. And I think we're going to see more of that in the future, and even see little fixes. Like you could say the Yeti isn't a little fix, but making fixes that you don't really have to do. It just seems like with some of the changes they've made recently, and even announcements like Carousel Progress and everything else, I can picture like a meeting where you have Josh D'Amaro talking to kind of his leadership team and saying, what are the areas that our guests really have issues with? And they can be like Disneyland Tomorrowland, Imagination Pavilion, Spaceship Earth. People aren't loving that as much as they used to. The Yeti bothers people, just as 4 examples right off the bat. All of those are being updated. They'll say, oh, well, we've got this dead end. We need more at Avengers Campus. I know that's been works for years, but California Adventure needs help. We need to do more. Okay, let's keep Avatar. Let's keep Pandora. Let's do Avengers Campus, Pandora, Coco. Let's see where we are. right there. That's, again, I don't want to give Josh D'Amaro so much credit because obviously Iger was still CEO. But I'm just saying they easily could have, when he took over as CEO, they could have scrapped projects. I know people have said, well, we didn't learn anything. I'll believe it when I see it. I've seen that exact phrase because they think about past announcements like the Main Street Theater at the Magic Kingdom or even the Spaceship Earth update or other announcements that made in the past that never happened. One, I think a lot of that had to do with the pandemic. Anything that was announced, or the Mary Poppins is another one, but anything announced before the pandemic, it's almost like there was a full reset. So I think that's part of it. And also, I think one downside of them working so far in the future and having to come up with these kind of big announcements is that some of it might not happen. But I have found that, we haven't had a lot of recent announcements that are not happening. They filled in. They said they were going to do Villains Land. They're doing it. They said they're doing Monstropolis. Tropical Americas. I know they had that weird thing with the thought experiment. Again, different leadership team, different group, still coming around the pandemic. I know we never heard about Wonders China, but also Chinese government, a lot of questions there too, from what I've heard. But overall, until I learn differently, I'm going to assume all of these are happening. I think they're doing a better job of kind of nailing down what they're doing and being clear about it. And if they don't, I'm sure there's a good reason. You could argue we're in a recession now, could be in a recession in the future. Disney attendance can go up and down. There could be fluctuations there, stock prices, profits, everything. When they announce it, I believe they think they will do it with everything they did here. But they do sometimes have to make adjustments. That's why they don't give really specific opening dates or anything. And this is not to make excuses for Disney. I'm just saying there are times when they have to make updates and change what they do and go back on what they say. And it's unfortunate because we get excited about these things, but things that are being constructed now will happen. And I suspect a lot of the things we heard about, I don't know, after so long for them to announce Figment and Dreamfinder, it's got to happen. It's got to happen. They would not do it. I don't think they would make the announcement of that or Disneyland's Tomorrowland if they weren't planning on doing it. Same with Spaceship Earth. I also want to mention Imagineering Story Season 2. Woo! That's exciting. Not till 2028. And I think it's going to be interesting because it focuses on the time around the pandemic. I saw the teaser for it and then what was happening there. It's going to have a very different vibe, but I also don't think it's going to be super promotional like the final episode of Season 1. Really excited about that. Leslie Iwerks came up on stage. But I promise this would only be an hour. So I'm going to stop there. I'm going to say that I have a lot of excitement and positivity about where they're going. Sure, not every attraction they announced or update they're making is what I would want them to do. Like I think about Country Bears. I didn't love them putting in Disney songs, but I think what they delivered was high quality. I think that's going to be the case with a lot of these. Yes, I'm guessing Spaceship Earth will not be exactly what I want, but it should be close. I did want to mention before I end that in 3 weeks, I will have a new podcast interview with Bob Rogers, the founder of BRC Imagination Arts. He also worked at Disney for a long time. We talk about several Disney attractions, the Trance Center, Bird and the Robot. We talk about the original animation tour with Robin Williams and Walter Cronkite, also other non-Disney attractions for NASA and for the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library, talking about his new book, Deep Story. This one fell in my lap. I hadn't really planned to reach out. I didn't really have to here. This one just kind of came to me. He's someone I used to want to talk to. He's someone I wanted to talk to when I was doing the show regularly. And so it happened and I was like, I can't believe it. We're releasing it in 3 weeks because of the release of his new book, Deep Story. So I hope you'll check that out. So if you just heard this and you don't know if you should subscribe or add to the feed, you should at least hang out for the next 3 weeks. After that, we shall see, but I will have a podcast interview coming September 8th, I believe, right after Labor Day. So look for it at that time. If you want to follow what I'm doing, follow me on Blue Sky, Instagram, Threads, The Dan Heaton for all those. I've simplified that a lot. Also have a Facebook page for Tomorrow's Society. And if you like this, the main thing I can just say is let people know you heard it. Spread the word about it. Say, hey, Dan's got a new episode. Dan's talking about D23. I totally disagree with what he said, or I like what he said. Doesn't really matter. Just tell somebody about it, because this isn't about like me personally benefiting or something financial or anything. This is just, hey, I have some thoughts. I think it'd be cool if I heard from you what you think of it and you got to hear them. it's just fun talking about Disney. I'm not sure what I'm doing in the future with the podcast beyond the episode I just mentioned, but can't wait for you to hear this. Take care out there. I hope you all are doing awesome. I do miss talking with you regularly. I really appreciate all the messages I've gotten from people saying that they missed the show or that they like the trip reports or everything else. You guys are all awesome. Hope you're hanging in there, doing well, and that you have some excitement from these new Disney announcements or anything else going on right now. Take care out there, and I'll talk to you pretty soon.